Hello everyone, this is Tommy Duncan.
And I'm Jimmy Stewart.
And we are back again for Black Men Speak, and we are continuing the dialogue and the conversation that we started in part one of the top issues for black men in our country, and we're going to continue that conversation. We have a special guest with us today.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Jedi Dawes, resident of the DFW area, and excited to be here today.
We're glad to have you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So in our first segment, we talked about what we felt were, three of the top 5 issues. One being incarceration, mass incarceration of black men in America. We talked a little bit, of course, about homicide, black-on-black homicide, and then we began the dialogue on, of course, unemployment and underemployment in the black community, and specifically for black men. So we're going to continue that dialogue and then see where the conversation goes from there. So let's kind of continue that conversation, Jimmy.
Okay. So on the employment front, of course, everyone needs money to live. You can't survive unless you someone left you a great deal of money, but for the rest of it, you have to work to survive. So work becomes a very important part of how we identify with society and how we take pride in what we do. So, but we want to make sure that within our community that we're, one, well represented, and two, that we understand that working and being a professional person or even being a tradesperson, as long as you're doing something that's legal, you're not breaking the law, you're not being a parasite on society, then you should be able to take pride in earning a living doing an honest day's work. And somehow, the concept of working and doing an honest day's work is being lost sometimes with some of our young people.
Right. And as we were talking about a little bit earlier, I mean, obviously, responsibility, typically speaking, in the American Nuclear Society is having a three-legged school of students.
Yes. You
have a father, a mother, and then obviously the children or the next generation that are coming up. And in particular, whether we go back to obviously the experience of chattel slavery in America, we look at the earlier part of the 20th century, prior to the ability to be able to vote freely, etc. And then we go to the second half of the century. You look at a challenge within our community of black men who have been unemployed and or underemployed compared to their peers in the Caucasian community, the Indian community, and or the Hispanic community. And so this is one of the issues that has had a huge impact on our community and our families overall. What are your thoughts, John?
I have to absolutely co-sign, and not just to co-sign, but it's a really major issue. And it's a major issue that, a lot of us are certainly up in arms, and rightfully so, with the foolishness, I'd say, that's gone on during the Trump administration. But it didn't just start with the Trump administration. Our unemployment numbers have been, just hemorrhaging for at least the past, coming up on 10 years now. And I say 10 years because and perhaps definitely even longer, but with the Obama administration as well, there were certain things that that didn't happen policy-wise, but also that could have happened in terms of executive orders and things like that would have directly benefited black America, putting black folks to work, getting money into black people's pockets. And when that doesn't happen, I'm just coming to see more and more like there's extended consequence for that. And so, we're seeing that in in a lot of our men being either, as you said, unemployed or underemployed, and then that challenge extending a lot of time to the next generation in terms of some of the decisions that are made or aren't made, in terms of seeing the value in being able to obtain those skills. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting to bring up that point because recently, of course, the Trump administration has espoused the fact that we have the best employment numbers, meaning the lowest unemployment numbers in the last several decades in the black community and in America. However, we're very clear that typically, I think we say that the general unemployment rate is around 3.5%.
3.8%, and I think you pointed out that we're always 3 points higher than the national average.
Exactly. So we're on average, we're about double.
So we're at 6.5.
Right.
And they say that's the lowest in American history. And I didn't realize that 6.5 was our lowest. But yes, the rest of the nation is at 3.8.
And typically, the black community is on average close to double the rest of the country. And then we ask the question, well, why is that? And then we start talking about power and access and some of those things, which is another subject and one of those other problems within our community. But when we talk about unemployment, underemployment, and the black male, one of the things that we have to consider is the fact when we look at the high school graduation rates and the college graduation rates for young women versus young men in our community, that is another travesty in our country, because there was at one point in time where black men were leading. Now it is completely flipped, and you have a significant larger number of black women getting high school diplomas and college degrees.
And post-college.
And we're not just talking about historically black colleges and universities, but at the predominantly white institutions, what I think we call PWIs now, the young women are outnumbering the young men in terms of getting their degrees as well.
So that's very true, Tom. And then the other aspect, we can't leave out entrepreneurship too. So I think, like you pointed out earlier, not all of us are going to fit into corporate America. You're not going to have the look, or you don't speak the language, and that's fine. But if you don't fit into corporate America, then you need to have the skills and discipline to go out and start your own. In fact, my father always taught me that you can't always count on others doing a job for you. So when there are no jobs, you can't find a job, you need to create a job. That's a very important skill. That starts very early. We start teaching our kids about business and about good financial and good money management at an early age. Then it certainly doesn't hurt for them to go out and have a little hustle of their own to earn some money so they know what it feels like. Like I was telling you before we started shooting, my very first job was cutting grass. And I didn't wake up one day and decide to just become a lawn person. My father, who was I guess very successful drug dealer, I let him encourage in that lifestyle, had given me when I was 6 years old a 5-gallon water jug, a water bottle, filled with quarters and silver dollars and dollars, silver and half dollars. It took me about 2 years to spend all of that money. I took money to school, I bought ice cream, I bought fruit, the fruit truck came by. And 2 years later, when it was empty, I took it back to my father and I said, hey, I need you to fill this up again. You know, you filled it up once. So I'm just thinking this is what fathers do. They just fill these things up, you know. You were one of your guys would tote it into my room because it was quite heavy. And he said, no, son, it doesn't work that way. He said, the first one's on me. So he said, from now on, it's on you. And I was like, well, I don't have any money. What am I going to do now? So he told me, he said, well, here's what I'll do for you. You can think of something. And I remember a couple of my buddies who cut grass. I said, well, I can cut grass. We didn't have a lawnmower. So he said, well, I'll buy you a lawnmower, get your gas can, and get you $2 to buy gas to get you started. And then you're on your own after that. And that was the last thing that he bought for me as a parent. But what it taught me, though, was that there are times that you have to go out and make things happen for yourself. And I would charge $1.50, $2 to go cut someone's grass, 4 or 5 yards on the weekend. And I had my money for the week and an ice skating rink and everything else I wanted to do, go to the movies. So it taught me a valuable lesson at an early age that sometimes you have to be able to go out and make for yourself.
No, absolutely. And I guess my question is, because there was a point in time in our country and within our community where the men were leading.
Yes.
The question is, when did that change? Where did the narrative change? And then we need to start discussing how do we close that gap. One, in our community, because if we consider the whole employment spectrum, our women, black women in our community, are more gainfully employed and they're doing better relative than black men. And so that's one piece we have to discuss. And then we start talking about closing the gap across all communities. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good one. So right off the bat, I would say is really going back to basics. As Jim was speaking, I was just thinking of my late grandfather on my dad's side. A proud man from Jamaica, how they came over to America.
Oh, no, Jamaican men will work.
Yes, they will.
Absolutely.
So he learned the bricklaying construction trade over in Jamaica, and then he came over to America, picking fruit and whatnot. Then finally got on with started his own construction company.
Okay.
7 children. He brought children over 2 at a time every year or every other year. My dad's a middle child. Came over when he was 10. They all stayed in an apartment in Hartford, Connecticut. Saved up, bought one house. True story. Lived in the top floor. Boys stayed in the bottom. Rented out the top. Bought the house next door. Did this exact same thing. Bought the house next door. To this day, at one point they owned 5 properties. To this day, those first 3 houses I mentioned, 2 of them are still in the family. Someone else owns the one in the middle. And I say that not just for some romantic tale. I realize it was a long time ago, but that same ethic of group economics and of sticking to the basics. This wasn't very smart man, but he didn't go to any college. He didn't go and get a degree to be able. He said that to be able to say that he got it from XYZ school. He stuck with the basics, and it really paid off. And so that is by far one of the things that I see that is missing with us. I remember as in high school, I went to Wiley High School down the road, and it was a very small black population there. It was 48 when we graduated, entire high school. But I remember the phrase of some teachers saying college isn't for everyone. My mind, such a racist comment, like, you fool, like, of course it's for everyone. But I see what that I don't know if that person meant it that way, but that's true. College isn't for everyone. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Education is for everyone.
Yes.
Education is absolutely for everyone. And so with that said, there are, I think we've taken the notion of college and glorified it more than it needs to be. It certainly has value. I'm proud of graduate Howard University. Had a great time there. I was able to do some pretty cool things there. But I recognize that value, right? And it's a world-class experience in terms of just being able to go to college wherever you go, right? It's definitely a privilege, but it doesn't have to happen that way. And there are a lot of people, particularly in other communities, particularly in the white community, just to be honest, that will go to the community college, will learn XYZ trade. You're talking about young men and women, and will come out making $50,000, even $40,000. But if you have minimal debt,
Big
and with the minimal debt, a lot of even college graduates wouldn't necessarily realize if they were in on this conversation what a head start. Because we all think the best of ourselves, but some of us think more of ourselves than we ought to, and kind of get into another reality. When I graduated Howard, I thought that by now I'd be a doctor in have my doctorate in physical therapy, be making 6 figures, working with my mom as a physical therapist. That didn't happen, right? But it's ultimately okay. But when that didn't happen, I didn't immediately kind of think to adjust my reality. What I should have done was taken myself on either to UDC, because I lost my scholarship at the time. I should take myself over to UDC and work during the night, or take myself back to Texas and kind of pick myself up and maybe gone to a community college, or maybe some other third option. But the basics have got to become, we've got to see the basics as the same value, sometimes if not more than college, and really begin to push that in our communities.
Let me ask you this, and I think you bring up a very poignant statement there in terms of being able to focus on the basics, and I appreciate the statement about your grandfather?
Grandfather.
So when we look at this whole employment and unemployment thing, what are the fundamentals? What are the basics behind where we are? How do we change? How do we turn the corner on that? Because there is a cause and effect to everything. What are
I
your
think,
thoughts?
part of it is that the black man is not aggressive enough. When you talk about working in corporate America, let's just focus on professional jobs. We may not be aggressive enough to make many inroads. I mean, we're capable of going out and finding jobs and getting into corporate America. We don't advance as well. One, black women advance, probably their advancement is a lot easier path
In certain areas.
in certain areas because they're not looked upon as much of a threat. But for us, even though society may not look upon us in the most favorable light, we still have to take the bull by the horn. We just can't ride behind and expect not to have some manure kicked up in your face every now and then, which is going to happen. So you want to be in front of the bull rather than behind it. And if it stumps on you, that's fine. You get back up and you grab the horns and try to wrestle it the best you can. What I say by that is that we have to take charge of what we do. So when I came out of the military, my first professional job was at TXU. There was a consultant there, a guy named his name was Jim. And for a couple of lunches, he basically taught me everything, most of what I know about consulting today. Put me on the path, how to negotiate bill rates and how do you find opportunities and how do you do this. And at the time, this was in 1990, Jim told me he was making $60 an hour, which I thought was an astronomical amount of money. Not today anymore. But for someone who's like, wow, because I didn't know anyone who made $60 an hour. Most people I knew, they were making minimum wage when you talk about hourly rates. And even on salary, people, I thought successful people were making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. My brother, oldest brother, was the most successful person I knew. And he made $22,000 as a career counselor down in Houston. He had a nice life, so I just thought $22,000 was the amount of money that you need to be successful. So when I went to work for TXU, guess how much money I asked for? $22,000 a year. Not knowing any better, they said yes, and so I'm like, okay, life was good, but then life wasn't good. It's like, man, I'm just able to pay bills and take care of family, so life was okay, but it wasn't great. And then I meet this guy named Jim who's making this astronomical amount of money, and I wanted to know what he knew, so I would take him to lunch and pick his brains. But I understood from the things that I learned from him, and then working as a consultant for almost 30 years, that you have to ask for things, you have to demand things, you have to lay a plan down for yourself. Don't just go to work every day expecting that they're going to recognize how great you are and promote you. You need to have a promotion plan in place. There's nothing wrong with telling your employer, look, I don't mind taking this job today, but in 2 years, I need to be looking for an opportunity to move up to something else. And I'll put in extra time. I'll learn whatever I need to learn. I'll work up under and mentor from whoever I need to, but I'm not going to just sit at this desk doing one thing for the next 30 years. That's just not reality. And then, people who do that, and somehow 5 years later, 10 years later, they're still at the same desk, and they're pissed off now because other people have moved up and they haven't. So sometimes seniority is not always the path to advancement. Sometimes the path to advancement is just you having a plan and you having the guts enough to go say, I want the promotion, I want to do this, I want to take on more responsibility, I want your job. Can you teach me so when you move up, I have an opportunity to take your space and move up. But if you're working for someone, and then the worst thing is that I had this one time, only once in my whole life, to work for someone who wasn't trying to move up, who was okay with being a low-level manager, and since he wasn't trying to move, and I couldn't move until he moved, that created a problem.
He was stuck.
Yeah, I was stuck. And so, I started talking to our director whenever he came to town to say, hey, that guy right there, you need to get him out of you need to go do something else, have him do and give me his job, and then I can do it twice as good, 3 times better than he could ever imagine doing it. So, but in the end, man, that created some other conflicts. I think he found out what I was doing. But needless to say is that just take charge of your career, whatever you're doing. Take charge of your life, and don't be afraid to be as good as you want to be. If you're a journeyman electrician, go out and start working on getting your master license, become a master electrician. If you're a plumber's helper, start working on getting your plumber's license, become a master plumber. Whatever you're doing in life, Just try to be the best that you can do it, and then all success will come after that. But don't just sit back and assume that everything is going to work out simply because you show up to work every day.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the unemployment and underemployment of black...
This is the unemployment.
Okay, unemployment.
That you can address the underemployment by doing something about it.
Underemployment.
Unemployment. Yeah.
Okay, well, what about the unemployment issue?
The unemployment is, because we know the path to the middle class is generally through school and education, getting some type of degree that's viable. Please do not go out and get a degree or a master's degree in zoology and you don't live near a zoo. They only have a few zoo jobs there available, and then wonder why
you may have to move.
You may have to move, or you may have to go do something else. There are a lot of people who are doing other jobs with outside of what their degree calls for. And to me, that means you either selected the wrong industry or you selected the wrong degree. So try to match them up, find a career that you enjoy, and go out and get the knowledge and training and skills that you need to do that every day. The other thing is just don't do anything for money. Find something that you enjoy doing. And also keep in mind, just like that 3% is built into the employment rate for us versus the national average, also keep in mind that you're going to encounter the same thing when you go to work for someone. Black pay is less than white pay. They don't really tell you what all the pay is because they don't want you to know. But one thing you may realize,
that's a fact.
That's a fact. I know that's for certainty.
Okay.
And I mean, I worked at Frito-Lay, and it's not to embarrass Frito-Lay, but I worked out there for 2.5 years, and I worked with a guy named Danny, and Danny and I did the same thing as network engineers, except he lived in Stonebriar, I lived in Oak Cliff. And as he was leaving one day to go work for another company, I just happened to ask Danny, hey, if you don't mind telling me, how much money do you make? And I found out, Tom, that he made twice as much as I did.
Twice as much?
Twice as much. I made $52,000 a year, he made over 100, and we did the exact same job.
How long have y'all been in the field?
We had similar backgrounds, about the same age.
Mm-hmm.
I had an electrical engineering degree, and he didn't.
And so the question is, it is a known fact, even though it may not be in the policy, that on average, and I don't know what the average is, if you have any job in corporate America, what is that figure? Let's say if you have a $100,000 salary and you have a Caucasian male, then a black male is 70,000,
possibly, yes. Because sometimes we don't know what to ask for. If you don't know, then certainly if you throw a figure out, then you're certainly, they always say whoever throws a number out first is the loser.
Right.
So sometimes you have to learn how to negotiate. So this is one of the things that Jim taught me when I was trying to break into consulting, was find out what the bill rate is and what other companies are paying. Never stick around anywhere for more than a year and a half because your skills are going to erode and become outdated. So plan on working places for a year and then move on, 2 years at the most. So there was, then when you go in to negotiate, ask for something outrageous, and you'll be surprised sometimes. Like, for example, one weekend I was watching a football game. I'm a big Cowboys fan, and a recruiter called me up, and I don't want to talk, about jobs. It's like, this is a Sunday, I'm watching the game, but he kept pestering me, and he said, well, just give me a number, and so I go back to my client, so I just threw out $100 an hour, and I figured I would get rid of him. He wouldn't call back unless he was watching the game. So I threw out $100 an hour, and he said, okay, when can you start? So you'll be surprised sometimes that even when you think you're throwing out now I know that for some consultant engineering positions, that $100 to $125 an hour is not outside the range of normalcy. But if you don't know this, then back then when I was happy to get $50 or $60 an hour, I would have threw out that number and been okay with it. He would have said okay to that and just pocketed the difference. So So sometimes we just have to become educated on what salaries, slots, and positions pay, and not be afraid to ask for the world and let them bring you back down to reality.
Right. So I guess we have maybe 7 to 10 more minutes before we close this segment out. We're just dealing with unemployment and underemployment at this point in time, and really addressing and solving the problem of unemployment and underemployment. And if I'm hearing you, you know, Jimmy, you're kind of talking about, one, having a plan, obviously
Sure.
continuous learning, and number three, being very aggressive and not being afraid to ask for what you think you're worth, or even more than what you're worth. And then, of course, on your side, you're talking about sticking with the basics and having a plan. And so if we want to kind of wrap this up, because everybody's, you know, is not either you guys. You guys have a lot of intellectual capital. I'm learning a lot here. The question is, if we talk to a broad audience of young men out there and or their parents who might be listening to them, and we're saying within the next 10 to 20 years, or even if you're someone in your 30s and your 40s, and you're saying you need to hedge your bets in terms of being underemployed, underpaid, and or unemployed. What is your 60-second take on that?
If there is an opportunity for either minimal debt, when I say minimal, I mean $5,000 to $7,000 total in terms of your tuition-related experience, go for that. If it's, of course, scholarship-based, definitely go for that if that's something that you're interested in. Otherwise, I would focus on investing after graduation $2,000 to $3,000 in yourself over the course of 1 or 2 years in terms of learning 3 to 5 skills. Maybe start with 1 to 2 that you can use in the workplace to be able to get your foot in the door if it's corporate America, what you're interested in, or to be able to kind of hang your own shingle and get out there and begin to make a name for yourself. But keeping that debt low, trust me when I say this, is super, super key.
So low to no debt and continually developing highly valuable skills.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then what's your second?
I would say that we need to be encouraged by taking a bargain page from my Asian brethren. If you look at what they could not do military, let's say like Japan in World War II, what they've achieved economically on the world scale, and even here in America, the Asian people of Asian descent are the highest paid people in America. They have the highest median income. They're almost $20,000 a year more than the average white person. They double our average income. So when you look at their approach to it, their approach was excellent education, and then focusing on careers, math, science, engineering. You don't see very many of them in education, social science, social studies, or liberal arts. You know, they don't focus on those degrees. They tend to lean more towards higher paying disciplines. So as a result, they're not reaping the benefit of that, because if you figure on average that the average Asian, median income of Asian is almost $80,000 a year, there are some that are in those nail shops that are making $20,000 a year. So there have to be a ton making several $100,000 a year to bring that average up to almost $80,000 a year. And that is something that we can be encouraged, that they've been able to do this in a few generations, that could be black people. And now if you keep up with what's happening with Harvard, there are several Asian groups that are suing Harvard because they say that Asian students are being discriminated against because so many of them qualify, meet the qualifications to get into Harvard. Harvard is actually scaling back how many Asian kids they will accept so they can make room for the white kids, the Jewish kids, and the black kids who are now having to come in on the affirmative action program because not enough of them who can compete with the Asian kids. So that can be us one day where we have so many black kids enrolled at Ivy League schools.